into the alley body historic race car for this episode. Unfortunately, I've lost a little bit of footage, so there's the intro, outro, that's gone, and sort of the first quarter of this build. So I'll do a bit of a voiceover for the start of it, kind of leading up to where I was at, and pick up from there. So I hope you guys enjoy, and back into some videos. I had a little bit of time off just over Christmas, having a bit of a rest, but I've got a heap of videos that I need to edit, and there's like 4 or 5 in the lineup ready to go. So gonna have a lot more on this build over here, and then other builds that have been in and out of the workshop. So enjoy this episode, there's a heap more to come. Up to this point of the build, I had already fully shaped the front scuttle, turned the edges to suit the framework, and then everything that I've done here was all on the power hammer, putting low crown in. And I was talking about the flatness, even though it's a flat body car, it is good to have a little bit of subtle crown. Otherwise, if it's too flat, when you turn those edges, it can actually suck the sides in and look like it's kind of got a bit of a dent. So it is always good to have a little bit of shape to everything, even if it's quite a flat car. My corners are starting to split as this material is coming around and stretching, and that edge is getting very, very thin. Same thing down in here. The material's starting to split up in here, and it's not very thick material through there, so I am going to trim a little bit off in these corners and then just weld a little piece in just in here. I will be keeping a fair bit of flange, but I'm just going to trim some off and add a little bit here, because as that continues to wrap around here, that's going to need more stretching in through here, and that's just going to split all the way through. I can see it, it's just on the verge of completely splitting. I've completed this front end up to the stage that I wanted, where I can almost start doing the rear end of this car now. I have tacked in this top panel into the sides, fitted them up. I do need to trim down some flanges to size and hammer over these flanges on here, hammer them around the frame, and then down in the bottom, that's got to be hammered over onto the bottom and then riveted. But before I do the rear end, I need to take this frame off, put the frame on the bench, because my extra material where the flange is going to be for creating the rear end is going to be hitting the chassis. So I've got to put it on the bench so then I can hang that sheet over and fully complete and turn the flanges for that on the rear end. And I have gone ahead, tacked this top piece in the sides, and you've got to be strategic about where your weld joint's going to be. Try and avoid welding in flat areas. If you're welding in a very flat area, getting that flat again is going to be really hard. So you want to go to where there is a lot of structure and shape. I will take this off, fully weld this up, and metal finish it along here. And same with when I do the rear, where that curve is, I'll be welding it down in through there. So we'll get this off, get the front end off, get it welded up, get this frame off, and then start making the rear end. For this front end, when I'm welding it up, I wire brush everything down. This is just an aluminium dedicated one that I use only on aluminium. Wire brush everything down just to clean up that material, or you could have a wire brush and a drill sort of thing, but I do like to dedicate it to just aluminium. I get a fresh rag, wipe it down with acetone just to clean anything off on the material. You want that as clean as possible when you're TIG welding aluminium. And the cup that I use is a number 5 gas lens TIG cup. So the gas lens is good, and that just runs that gas really nicely through the TIG. And then a number 5 I find is a good cup, and that welds fine for the 1.2 aluminium and any alley work that you are doing. It's a good cup. process for doing this rear quarter panel in here is basically exactly the same as everything else. A little bit of shape up and through here. Mark out these edges, fold these edges over at the front, top, round this back edge around like I have in the rear panel. And the only different thing is this body line up in here. Now that's there because the chassis actually kicks in a little bit down and because the suspension actually sits on the outside. So it's running on a leaf spring and the leaf's got to come up in this area here. So that's for clearance purposes. And if you end up following the shape of the chassis, it'll end up looking like there's a big dent in the back of the quarter panel in through here. So that's why this body line is put in up in here. So next thing we've got to do pretty much is weld up this back end, put it on, and we can start hammering some edges over. The back's welded up and fitted. I've clamped everything up to where this body line is here. Both sides is going to need a bit of a weld up in here and here, just a little short one, just to fully complete this body when I've knocked everything over. So I do need to wrap this around the frame now, wrap it around underneath and over here on top. So I am going to mark around some of these flanges here that go over, trim the flanges a little bit shorter, just so I've got less material to move around because it does have excess material. So I will trim those short, knock that over here on top, and then trim the bottom as well, knock the bottom over onto the frame, around the wheel arch, everything like that. Give this a little bit of a hammer up and a tidy up in through here as well. And yeah, weld these little joints up in here. And most of this body will be pretty much done, wrapped around. It does need a few rivets underneath. And then I don't know if it's going to be riveted on the other side. I'll talk to the customer, but that'll be clamped on just by wrapping that around the frame. So we'll do that and get this thing a little bit more closer to being done. So working this wheel arch in through here, I like to use this shape hammer and use a dolly, and even go a lower profile dolly as you get this flange further around, because you really got to work this flange and stretch it right out just to get this around into this wheel arch here, because there's a lot of material to move and you don't want it bowing out. You want it to stay flat all the way through. So you really got to work it. And you can probably see on the frame on the other side, that frame only comes to about here. So with the hammer and dolly, I'll work this edge in through here and then project this line of the wheel arch up and through here so it comes all nice and smoothly in here. And the rest of the front, I can knock over the frame, but just this area here, there's no frame there, so I've got to work that with the hammer and dolly. Got to do a little bit of shrinking up in here as well on the corners. And then this thing, this will look quite nice with all those flanges all wrapped around it now. That's it for the alley body build. Fairly basic one, but some nice tips in there as well for if you're going to do something like that. So it's a nice project to do. I love having those in the shop. They're nice and quick to do, which is pretty nice instead of, you know, bigger, longer builds. So it's a nice in-out job. I hope you guys have enjoyed that one. Next episode coming up, going to be having a bunch of work here on this F100, a couple of other jobs that have been in here, and some future jobs that are coming in here as well.